Welcome to our office. My name is Akash Magoon. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of Adonis. Adonis is a company I started with my brother. We use AI to help medical practices and hospitals automate their revenue cycle. Today is not about me or Adonis. Today is about learning from our esteemed set of guests about how they've been growing their practices using AI and other tools and technologies to continue scaling their operations. First and foremost, we have William Vanderveer. Will is the CEO of Redefine Management, a top orthopedic pain and spine group based out of New Jersey with over 100 providers across 50 locations. Will comes from a unique background in that he didn't start his career off as a doctor or in the medical space. He actually started off in property management. And so today I'm really excited to learn from Will about how he's gone from his early background to now leading one of the fastest growing orthopedic groups in the country. Will, please tell us about your journey and how you ended up here.
So I got into this out of college with a bad '08 crisis, so real estate wasn't the play. I ended up getting into healthcare through a friend who understood what I was trying to pursue on the real estate side. And ultimately, my value was connecting providers that made sense to work together and obviously have some synergy on patient care. Led me into marketing and advertising in the healthcare space. That business that I originally started was acquired, made some money, and figured out that healthcare is where I wanted to be. Ultimately got recruited by a company called USPI, United Surgical Partners, so largest ASC, ambulatory surgery center management company in the country. Worked there for a few years, understanding the value that outpatient surgery has for our country, lowering the cost of care, providing better patient outcomes, lower infection rates, et cetera. That space led me into getting back into the privately held space of running my business in healthcare, ultimately leading down the road of Redefine Management. So the company that I currently operate and run is a management company, non-PE backed, helping provide providers with the independence that they so desperately need to be independent, successful on their own without joining a health system or be acquired by private equity, to enjoy the freedoms of being a doctor, offering great service to patients independently of a third party. That business has now expanded, and we're bringing this to new markets and hopefully continuously expanding. The acquisition of other businesses that support that, a group purchasing organization and a revenue cycle company, have brought me to you. And our ability to work together has only proven to be more valuable to help lower the cost of care and provide more innovation to those providers.
Thank you. And for the audience, Will, can you just share a few of the services that your group provides to the practices that are in your platform?
So yeah, we're completely vertically integrated. So marketing, advertising, all the way to group purchasing, our finance department, human resources, procurement. It's all handled internally by us. Basically, we're the doc in the box model. So physicians can join our practice, whether acquired, partnered, or independently leaving a health system wanting to start their own practice. And they have the ability to have brand autonomy, a lot of the freedoms and independence of creating their own PTO, their schedule, their quasi way in which they want to operate their business. But we give them back-end support from an entire full spectrum perspective of the business to run without the constraints of a privately held PE-backed MSO that would maybe push back on some of those things. So the independence factor is obviously what drives our value to, I think, these groups joining.
Thank you. What's really fascinating about Will's journey with Redefine Healthcare is that they haven't taken a single dollar of outside capital. And in a few moments, we'll pick his brain on what that actually looks like and how he was able to pull that off. Next up, we have Melanie Suranto. Melanie is the SVP of Revenue Cycle Management at Privia Health. For those that don't know Privia Health, it's a publicly traded NASDAQ company with north of $2 billion in revenue with several thousand medical providers. And as a result of being so good at collecting that revenue, Melanie has led her team to receive the Healthcare Financial Management Association's MAP Award 8 times in the last 9 years. Melanie, you didn't get your start working for a provider group. You started out in the medical equipment space. Tell us about your journey in the medical equipment space and how you landed into Revenue Cycle.
Sure. Well, I landed in Rev Cycle right out of high school. It's interesting. My mother worked for a radiology organization, ran their IT and Rev Cycle department. And if you're running IT and Rev Cycle, it's a really small organization. But they basically said, if you're anything like your mom, we want you to come work for us. And I was 18. And that's how I started in Rev Cycle. And I didn't know at the time I was going to make a career out of it, but it certainly has been a fun journey. I always say that if you're in rev cycle, you like to have your pants on fire because it's constantly changing. And it's very challenging, very rewarding. But from there, I spent 20 years in med device, wound care, and then 11 years for a company called Cochlear Americas, where we manufacture cochlear implants for deaf patients. And I thought I would never leave that organization until I got the opportunity to join Privia, where we're impacting millions of patients' lives. We have 4,800 providers across 15 states. We are a physician enablement organization and with a heavy focus in value-based care. Much like you, we start up a medical group, and then we work to keep providers independent. So the challenges with that are we can't control and tell them all what to do, but we have an obligation to them to continue to persevere and provide the best kind of service from a rev cycle perspective. And so we pride ourselves in top-notch service, and that's why I'm here.
Thank you. And lastly, we have Mike Jablon. Mike is the Chief Financial Officer of Allied Digestive Health. Mike comes from a unique background in that he didn't start his career off working for a provider group, but rather on the private equity side, where he was investing in businesses like Redefine or Privia as an investor. Mike, can you tell us about your journey investing in companies that are in the medical provider space and how that ultimately led you for success being a CFO at a provider group itself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So, growing up in high school or even before that, I actually always wanted to be a doctor. That's what my mom wanted me to be too. I think when it started to get close to my college years, when I was probably a 16 or a 17-year-old, I sort of said, I don't know if I want to go to school for another 10 years. And so that sort of led me into finance. Instead of going to Duke or Dartmouth, I went to Wharton, and my mom was really upset about that. But coming out of Wharton, like most folks, I went right into finance and investment banking, and that led me actually to a healthcare investment bank. So it was a way for me to sort of bridge kind of both of those interests, that math and finance side, with that healthcare and helping people. And so, I got into, healthcare private equity at a firm called Varsity Healthcare Partners in 2013, kind of before the real physician practice management boom. And so, I was kind of in sort of in the early innings of that. And, I got to work along really interesting people, fast-paced growth, and provider businesses. And what we really thought as an investor, which was really important, was like, as an investor in healthcare, if you're solving problems for the healthcare ecosystem, you're going to make a lot of money, right? But you're also going to do really good for the sort of the system. And so we thought about investing in businesses that solve problems with cost, care quality, or access, right? Access to care. And so that led me into the dermatology and ophthalmology space in 2014. And so, I really enjoyed that. And I really enjoyed working alongside my management teams in helping, provide top-notch service for our providers, for patients, for the whole ecosystem, and helping them grow. One of the biggest pain points we had during the time period, especially when you're growing, is revenue cycle. And sort of that, brings us to where we are here today. But after doing that for about a decade and kind of investing in and helping grow businesses across all different types of specialties, I wanted to settle down and take some, have a little less fast-paced sort of life. And I decided to go working for an operating company. So again, what did I really know? I knew how to invest in, multi-location healthcare providers, private equity-backed businesses. And so that led me to, working at a private equity-backed multi-location healthcare provider. I first started in the orthopedic space. I did that for a number of years, and I landed at Allied, about 15 months ago. Allied Digestive Health is probably the largest GI business in the tri-state area. We've got 75 locations, 300 providers, pushing north of 300 million in revenue. And so over, here, we, again, same sort of logic in investing in GI. look, there's a sort of a colon cancer epidemic in this country. It's affecting people at a younger age. A lot of people don't have access to care, or they're not getting care early enough. And so there's a way to really provide that access and really have a win-win for both patients and providers, but also our investors. And so thinking along those lines is what brought me here. And at Allied, I fortunately or unfortunately oversee both finance and RCM. RCM is a incredible pain point. It was when I was an investor, and I didn't even know half of what I know about RCM now. Back then, I thought RCM it's difficult, but it's not too bad. No, it's a lot more painful on the ground, but it's as my esteemed colleague here said, it is like, you're working with your pants on fire. Things are constantly evolving, things are changing, and the need for leveraging business intelligence tools, RCM tools, AI and technology is greater today than it's ever been. And the access to that stuff is getting, these tools are becoming real.
Thanks. Is your mom proud of you?
Now she is. It took her 20 years to get over it.
That's great. Well, we're as audience members, we have the unique privilege of hearing from three folks that have or work for diverse companies. Will, as I mentioned, runs a company that hasn't taken a single dollar of outside capital. Melanie represents a publicly traded physician organization, and then Mike is now part of a PE-backed GI roll-up. I'm really curious to learn more about what that means for each of your businesses. Maybe starting with Mike. Now that you're reporting to a board of PE investors, how do you think about running your business differently than maybe some of the colleagues that you're speaking in front of?
Yeah. So, in the private equity space and a private equity backed business, there is a typical hold period, which is sort of 3 to 5 years, maybe 3 to 7 years, really. And the idea is to invest a lot in the businesses up front, help grow them, streamline operations, professionalize them, and then eventually, exit and return capital to your investors. And so you have a lot of different competing priorities. I'm constantly being told, I want you to grow faster. I want you to do a better job, right? Do a better job at RCM, especially, and cut costs. So I'm like trying to balance those competing priorities, which is very difficult. And look, the private equity investors, they're sophisticated investors. They understand healthcare. My sponsor specifically only does healthcare businesses and has probably half their portfolio is in the provider space. And so they have a very, an acute lens to look at these businesses and really understand them. And so it's really important for me to get ahead of things with my sponsor, meaning like I can't tell them, oh, by the way, cash is dried up, I need to borrow money right now without having any visibility into that. And so, having as much intelligence around both the financials and the RCM side of the business is super important with the private equity sponsors for sure.
Thanks. Melanie?
Well, I would like to say my answer differs. It really doesn't. I'm in rev cycle, and whether I'm in rev cycle for a public or a private organization, my job is the same. And that's to get all of our providers paid and every dollar and cent I can collect. So for me, it really doesn't look much different. I'm used to and have built RCM teams from the ground up. And in doing that, you learn what you need to do right away and what you need to do well, quickly. In a fast-paced organization, the growth is great, but the technology is critical in order for you to scale. And that's where we're at right now. And in every state you go into, you're dealing with different payers, different government regulations, and you need to know them all, and you need to be experts in all of them. And it's very hard to do that and be good at it across all of those states with all of those payers and keep all of your providers happy without technology. And so, again, whether you're private or public, it's really about how good you are at fighting with the insurance, staying on top of the documentation that you need to support, getting ahead of them, staying on top of your payer coverage policies. And I can go on and on and on about all of the different things that what I like to call kind of like red tape, or all the things you have to do well to make sure you're maximizing your revenue.
Thanks. And Will?
I'm a bit of a hybrid between them in the idea that we obviously take providers' practice-specific locations into account, whether it's someone was away for a few weeks in Europe because they were traveling or what have you. The P&L matters, but it doesn't matter as strong. However, that means that we care just as much about the revenue cycle collection ratios. And again, our billing company, I think, had done such a phenomenal job that our resistance to working with Adonis in the beginning was we do a lot of the things that Adonis help support on a manual level. And that is to say that the average billing company prior to us, acquiring it that we had encountered had nowhere even close to the mark of, honestly, quality or stringency on just reporting and data. So when we met Adonis, the issue was we did a lot of what they offered. In the last 12 months of meeting them, the cycle and the growth and the improvement of the product, where now AI is really being very, very, very much on the forefront of it. It being intuitive, it growing the business itself has led that company to release its harnesses of saying, let's embrace this, let's focus on it, let's improve it, let's be a true partner. And that has been the most exciting part for us because our revenue cycle company, which we thought to be a 1%er, is now getting even better, which is great. And that's because of the help of Adonis. At the same time, in terms of the quality expectations and where we were as a organization, we've been able to still maintain that autonomy. No one's getting yelled at because, the Q3 numbers weren't there because we can point out that, Dr. Smith was, in Ibiza and that's why versus the actual quality to collections and the ratios and the reporting. So I think that's where we land in this matter. It's kind of a quasi hybrid. We're not as beholden to the P&Ls, even though they're doing great and every month we're doing better and we're doing extremely well with that. But I think the system designed here has been able to help give us a bit more of a backbone to support the idea that data matters and what we're pursuing in terms of quality and assurance is accurate. And not only that, the idea on a P&L level, cost control on more bodies don't necessarily solve all problems has been a huge piece of this.
As most people in the audience may know, but as a quick refresher, probably 80% of revenue cycle happens within the practice management system, like an Athena Health or an eClinicalWorks or an Epic or a Cerner. And the three guests that we have here today are all on a single platform called Athena Health. Athena Health has been a preeminent EHR and PM system. And as AI has continued to move at a fast pace, all three businesses here have been very focused on how to deploy AI within their revenue cycle. Maybe starting with Melanie, Privia has been at the forefront of bringing in automation and technology and AI into your entire operations throughout the business. Tell us about maybe a couple examples of how you've used automation or AI and how you hope to use it within revenue cycle.
Sure. One thing that actually Athena is one of our Athena success stories is we had an RPA job that would run every night. And if you're familiar with Athena, there are some checks you have to do before you actually can get a claim out the door. And our providers would say, why do I have to click this every time? And we would say, you're right, you shouldn't have to do that. And so we worked with our internal IT team and built robotic process automation to facilitate that process every single night. As you can imagine, with a number of claims we had, it took a lot of usage from our IT team, and sometimes that bot would go down. And so we would go to Athena and we say, you really need to do this. We shouldn't have to do this. And so they recently implemented their auto claim creation. And that was a really great success story for us because they took away the number of RPA jobs we had running behind the scenes. And with that, if you're familiar with RPA, anytime Athena would make an enhancement, we'd have to go behind the scenes and edit all of those RPA jobs. And it took a lot of resources, a lot of time, and sometimes there were glitches. And if there were glitches, that glitch would hold up millions of dollars in revenue overnight. So that's one way that we made our providers' lives a little easier, also ensured we stayed on top of getting our revenue out as quickly as possible, and worked with Athena to expedite that process. And we continue to look for ways to do that. That's only one way, but I have plenty others I could share too.
You also mentioned a few moments ago that Privia being in multiple different geographies, there's changing payer policies, payer contracts. Every geography has its own idiosyncrasies. How has your team kept on top of those changing payer goalposts and stayed ahead of the curve?
Wow, that's a great question. And honestly, I don't know if we're ever truly ahead of the curve on all of them. There's so many that are constantly coming out. We've purchased subscriptions. We have tons of people signed up for newsletters that we scan and we're looking for updates. We also invest in revenue integrity software to try to monitor underpayments and things like that. But the policy is a tough one, honestly. And that's one of the reasons why we're partnering with Adonis, because that takes us having to stay on top of all of the evolving parts that could very quickly jeopardize the health of one of our providers that maybe is running a specialty test that's no longer going to be covered, or has some CPT codes that are now going to be bundled that we didn't get ahead of and negatively impacted their revenue. And so we're excited about the partnership so that we don't have to stay on top of those things and monitor those things and negatively impact revenue.
Thank you. Mike, you mentioned that your PE board, your private equity board is constantly pushing you to grow your revenue, but also cut costs. Sounds like one of the ways to cut costs is through automation, and I think your team has done a pretty good job of employing that. Tell us about that journey and how you done it.
Yeah, so I think when I joined the organization about 15 months ago, the business had been growing so fast. We had acquired probably 18 practices in the prior 12 months. Those were all getting converted from their legacy EMR into Athena. And it was having visibility in the RCM, world and what was happening was like of paramount importance, especially because if things go wrong, cash gets dried up. And unfortunately, my sponsor gets a daily cash tracker that sees exactly how many dollars are collected every single day. And so I think, what we did, and this is part through partnering with Adonis, is we implemented the RCM intelligence tool. That was great. That immediately provided me daily, weekly visibility into all of the sort of the executive level things that I need to see, so I could, at least when I see something happening, denial spike, claims submitted not going out fast enough, I could inquire, right? But on top of that, I found that we were growing so fast and we couldn't add enough bodies in RCM to handle all the work. We couldn't even add enough vendors. The vendors didn't have time to spool up. And so what I think helped, again, when we partnered with you guys was the interface between sort of the Adonis intelligence tool and Athena allowed my team to not have to do as much manual stuff and downloading Athena reports, running pivot tables, figuring things out. They could do that within all the platform, and then also click through things and sort of really tactically right into Athena, put on the notes that need to be followed up on and all that. So that allowed me not to have to hire as many people because I couldn't find them anyway. And so that was a challenge. And then, as it relates to, using AI, I think like you said here, the payers are constantly changing their documentation requirements and other things. And I saw, early on, we had a spike in really denials, or not hard denials, but denials in some fashion, with a lot of payers asking us for more documentation. And we would then say, okay, well, let's submit this documentation with the claim. Well, they couldn't receive the information with the claim, right? So it had to be emailed to them, and then they had to get it attached to the claim. Well, how do you attach it to the claim? You have to call the payer, right? And so I had one person in my office just calling the payers every day saying, claim number, this claim number, we sent this email, and basically getting it attached to the claim. And so we used a really interesting AI agent to do that with really good results so far. And we're then kind of thinking about all the other use cases around these AI agents, because again, there's so many repetitive tasks, so many things now. I see how sophisticated these AI agents are getting. And so I wonder, that's a very specific use case. But I just, I'm really interested in hearing more about like how that can be developed over time, because there's so many different things, where that technology can be utilized effectively.
One of the things I wanted to talk about, which is a good jumping off point from what you mentioned, Mike, is that the industry is seeing a huge influx of AI agent point solution vendors. And I'm sure all three of you are receiving dozens and dozens of emails on a weekly basis of a certain company pitching you various things. How do you think about evaluating new technology and bringing that in to drive better operational efficiency? Maybe we can start with Will.
Yeah, we looked at multiple companies that have approached us. I think our standard is, what have you done before? What are you willing to do in the future? And when I say that lightly, what are you willing to do in the future is a huge part of that. I think we partner with the idea that we can work together and work on solutions. I think some of the companies that have approached us historically have said, here's what we've figured out, here's what we can do. And when we've ran through it, again, I don't want to say that we have a great revenue cycle company. I think we have a very, very good one, if not borderline great on a manual level. But we found kinks or issues or workflow problems that were not willing to be addressed. This is what we offer. This is what we do. We do it well. And unfortunately, that to us is not good enough, right? Okay, it's great that this is going to be a bit more automated. It can, in theory, lower the cost, but the quality of what we want on result is not there. So we found value in working with you because we wanted to drive some innovation around, okay, let's advance the product. Let's work together. Let's figure out where it could improve.
Melanie, anything else you'd add to how you evaluate technology and vendors that you may work with now or in the future?
Sure. A big one for me, because to the point you made, we are constantly getting outreach from different vendors for every service you can imagine. And even those that we get in front of and it's just a concept, right? And unfortunately, we're too large of an organization to invest time in a concept. While the concept may be extremely innovative, we need it to be tried and true. And so that's what we're looking for when we are seeking out vendor partnerships, is longevity of the organization, how are their security protocols, can they scale with us, is a big one too, and are they willing to be a partner? How are they willing to allow us to have a seat at the table when they're developing their roadmap, because that's important for us.
Thanks. Mike, one of the things that's been impressive about watching the Allied growth is that your team's grown very quickly through M&A. And presumably the A in M&A, the acquisition, seems pretty straightforward. You get out the checkbook and you write an offer and hopefully you win the deal. But the merging seems pretty difficult around how do you take another practice you bring into your umbrella and get them merged into one system so that you can actually deploy automation or bring economies of scale on top of that. How have you guys gotten so good at M&A, and where do you think it goes from here?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it sort of takes a village to do that. Acquiring and integrating practices involves so many different aspects of that practice, right? There is the, sort of the billing side of it and the RCM side of it, but then there's the people side of it, there's the finance side of it, there's the operational workflow side of it. And so it really takes a village. So we have, we have a good team at ADH in all of those disciplines. Oh, and HR too. My chief people officer would be, mad if I didn't bring that up. It's also, really, really important. And so I think the way we've been able to do that really quickly is, one, we have to bring on a lot of staff. We supplement that with consultants, but we also get the buy-in from that provider. And how do we get that buy-in? It's basically showing them a track record of having done it before. And what we have seen is that when they go on the ADH platform, all of their statistics sort of get better, right? One, we have a little bit better rates. That's always helps. But two, like their denials go from here to, here, and we're able to show that, and their yields go up. All of those things happen because they partner with us. So when we get the buy-in from the physicians and we deploy the right tools and the right sort of cadence, it can be really effective. And when I tell a doctor, hey, you're going to partner with us and you're going to sell us a little bit of your earning stream, but you're going to make more, 6 months from now after we integrate you, and that actually happens, I look really good. Right. And so, it is a challenge. It can be, you hit a lot of speed bumps on the way, but it really involves bringing in the right resources in order to enable that.
It seems like all three businesses, Redefine, Privia, and Allied, you offer a much better life for physicians when they're part of your network. But I think the common misconception of maybe the average healthcare consumer is that going to a provider group that's part of a bigger network maybe has a poor service offering or a worse consumer experience. Can you talk about how you're balancing the mission of providing better care while also thinking about the margin of your businesses and making sure you're still creating a great business at the end of the day, and how you do both of those in tandem?
Who's up?
Let's go, Will.
So I think we've created a brand local scenario where we file a DBA on behalf of every group that joins. So there is a local sense of this is my provider. I've known them for years. I don't force them to be a brand identity that they don't want to be a part of. So that's a start, right? They walk in the door. It was the doctor they're used to seeing. That doesn't change. The revenue cycle structure changes, the EMR changes, but in theory, the brand identity is still what they're used to. In terms of cost, we obviously have been drived towards an effort of consolidating everyone in network. So for those providers that join us that were out of network with a few select partners, that helps provide a lower cost of care. For those providers that didn't have certain services in office that we now offer, the convenience factor, I think, has been driven up dramatically to those patients. And then, of course, we're giving them an outpatient solution for surgical events. In fact, if they need, a surgery or a pain procedure, whatever it may be. So I think it's a multifactorial approach about making sure that the patient's experience has been better suited with us than without us. On top of that, you also have to, resonate with the idea that patients don't like the idea that when they go to a healthcare provider, they're hit with unknown cost. I'm sure everyone here has received an EOB from either a system or an experience with a provider where you're like, whoa, what's going on here? So we strive to not only remedy that with how we're operating our model, but also being proactive in communication. So I think our patients do call back and realize very quickly that we're willing to discuss the explanation of benefits and why and how this impacts them financially. That is much better than I think the keep it quiet, keep it in the dark, get the EOBs figured out, send them to collections, have a patient freak out, call the practice up, panic mode. I mean, that whole approach to us has worked very well. So for however that's worth answering it, I think our brand independence model has allowed patients to accept the fact that they're a part of a larger organization, but we've helped streamline certain pieces of it that really do resolve the issue of them ending up in collections in 60, 90 days because they were unaware.
Melanie?
Sure. Will, we are very similar where we empower physicians to stay independent and they join our medical group. They're getting the same thing. They're getting our rev cycle services. They're getting our credentialing services. They're getting our HR and our legal and compliance support as well. But because we allow them to be independent, they can treat the same patients and they can treat the patients the way that they want to. If a provider wants to see 20 patients in a day, they can. If they want to see 10, they can. Our job is to make sure that we give them the best service and we allow them to make those choices independently. I agree with you as a patient myself. Surprises are never fun for anyone, but it's also about self-service, right? I want to make sure that I can control the things I control on my time. I'm very busy. And so I also look at convenience. How easy is it for me to schedule an appointment with my provider? How easy is it to pay my bill? I paid a bill last night. It was 20 seconds. That's pretty awesome. 20 seconds, maybe even less. But I think it's important for our patients and for our providers for them to be able to have choice because Privia has several in-network Privia providers. You can see your primary care. You can see your cardiologist. I mean, all within the Privia family. And I think that's what makes it special.
Mike?
Yeah, no, I think, I think we're all speaking the same language here. It might be Allied Digestive Health. That's the sort of the umbrella organization, but each practice within our group keeps their own branding. I've seen this done throughout my career a bunch of different ways. I think in businesses where a large, well-known conglomerate or sort of, corporate entity is important is where they're maybe not getting their healthcare so locally, right? Healthcare is a local business. When it comes to, somebody, coming into a new area, going to a dentist or something like that, like there's all these corporate ones out there and having a well-established corporate brand might be important. But for GI, these doctors have been in their communities for 20 plus years. And so it's really important to keep the same branding that again, healthcare is a local business for this type of specialty. As it relates to clinical care and the patient experience, experience. That's really, the doctors are really, the leaders on that. We don't tell them how to practice medicine. We don't know how to do that. We only know how to support them. What I can say is we do help on the patient engagement side. We think it's really important for patients to be more engaged in their healthcare, and so we bring out a lot of tools in that regard. But I think I really don't see us making any money by taking costs out of the system in a way that curtails patient care. It's really more about growing practices, providing more access to the community, providing a larger suite of services within that sort of specialty or the adjacent specialties. That's where we get the best pound for our buck. Reducing staff at a clinic that's running totally fine just doesn't make sense, and it really doesn't lead to any improved profitability in the long run.
Thank you.
Said as a CFO, right? Who's always thinking about that.
Yeah. Seeing how engaged the audience is, I'm sure there's a bunch of questions that they have. So I'm going to ask one last question, then open it up to the audience. Each of the three of you have grown very, very quickly in your careers or your respective businesses, and healthcare can sometimes be a thankless job, but it's also one that it's really difficult and really operationally intensive to scale and be involved in. Tell us about why you come to work every day in the morning and what keeps you as motivated in healthcare as when you first started. Maybe we can start with Melanie.
Well, I feel like if you were in healthcare and specifically in reimbursement, you have to find pleasure and joy in making sure that you're doing the right thing for your providers that you support. And because of rev cycle teams, our doctors get to stay, and our providers get to stay operating, right? Especially during COVID was really a tough time. It really highlighted how important rev cycle is. Is that not that anybody ever questioned it, but providers still had to pay their rent, right? Even though they weren't able to see patients. And so I think about that. I think it changed all of us, but really for me, it's about making sure that my providers are getting paid for the work that they're doing, and that the insurance and holding the insurance companies accountable and making care affordable for patients who deserve quality care.
Mike?
Yeah, no, I think it comes down to, as I referred to before, wanting to be a doctor. I just want to help people. I also see that, what really motivates me is like healthcare is such a sort of a dysfunctional kind of system in this country. And, I think there's a lot of ways that I could, from an investor side and an operator side, like help the healthcare ecosystem. And that's like, it's a puzzle, right? And I like figuring things out. And so that challenge to me and that sort of satisfaction of being able to do that really is why, I come to work and plan on staying within, this healthcare kind of field for, forever.
Will just whispered to me that he needs a drink for this answer. So
Yeah, sorry for that.
You get the last word.
I started this business in 2017 without a paycheck. I left my prior role running a large group to do it. And I just believed that it could be done better. So I looked at my practice that was performing well, but not that well. And I looked at the standard other groups out there and said, there's just no way that this is the standard. Like, if we're good, then we're not even like close to scratching the surface of what better looks like. So my passion has always been improve it, because I know that not only is it going to improve my physician's life and the quality of my employees who are now making more money, but the patient's life who's able to experience groups going in network with more payers, or working through more strategic opportunities to lower cost of care, or maybe invest in more equipment or technology that's going to drive better outcomes. So my whole thing was, no offense to everyone in the idea of being like comfortable in the space, but I feel like the bar is really low in healthcare, and where it should go and where it needs to be is much higher. And that's what my passion's been. It's like, let's rise this bar. Let's drive it up.
Please join me in a round of applause for our guests. We'll open up to the floor for some questions.
This question's for anyone on the panel. It seems like generally with AI agents in this world we're moving into an automation, it's very easy to get really excited about the costs that are being taken out of the business. We had someone making phone calls, or we had teams of people making phone calls. And of course, looks good to the boards and investors and everyone else. But I'm curious, the using automation to drive revenue increases or agents to drive revenue increases. For anyone, any examples of how you're thinking about that? Any success stories of using agents or automation to actually drive increases in revenue?
I just give the example alone of staying on top of thousands of payer coverage policies, right? That's a lot of workflows to have to write for a lot of different teams. And if you think about like I've got national teams that have to support 15 different markets, and it's my responsibility to try to make their roles easier, right? Less complex, because it's tough that they have to go into multiple different software systems, whether it's one payer or another, on top of our system, on top of, system after system after system. So anything I can do to make it simpler is important to me. So that increases their job satisfaction.
Ours has been, in theory, smarter architects are focusing on better builders. So the idea of this is we can design systems and help improve the product outcome, but again, unrelated to the P&L piece of having less bodies work on the problem, it's been that there aren't the mistakes made consistently with turnover. As you know, revenue cycle has a lot of turnover. So when you're hiring, employing, and training people, and that turnover creates a impossible ratio to fix, Adonis fixes or has potentially fixed that problem, because right now we go in and design a solution to fix a problem we have. And not only does it get done right, but it gets done right repeatedly, regardless of the turnover. So that was one of the huge improvements that we've seen.
Yeah, and then I just add that, anytime you're improving any aspect of the revenue cycle, in a way you're sort of improving yield. We use some AI assisted coding. That means accurate coding, less denials, better yields. We're using, there's denial management pieces. So you're, getting ahead of denials, getting ahead of the documentation requirements. All of that stuff leads to better yields. And I know I talk a lot about being like focused on cost. The top line's important too. But just making my life easier sometimes is really important, right? And there's a lot of pain points that we deal with in the revenue cycle. So any way that we could use tools to lessen that pain, allows us to focus on other things like maximizing revenue.
One of our challenges that we're diving into right now is payer fee schedule identification, so that we can apply it to our actual allowables to understand our true underpayment challenge and opportunity, which that's a growing it's a growing behavior with the payers. Now they're auto down coding and hoping that we just don't see it. How are you guys thinking about identifying the many, many fee schedules for the many cares? Because we're national too. So it's very difficult. How are you guys processing through that challenge?
Yeah, I can take it.
So we invest in a software that we load all of our 1,600 fee schedules into. And we have a team that fully supports auditing. And we're looking for underpayments. Every month we're running charge alert reports. I mean, you name it. And so I'm really excited about the partnership. We haven't gone here yet with AI, but we are planning to have AI help us, right? But they've got to feed off those fee schedules. They got to be there. So you do have to take the time to load them and then stay on top of them, especially if you're doing drugs every quarter. It's very tedious, to say the least, but it's definitely worth it, and something that has helped us, again, hold the payer accountable and catch those things that, to a common eye, your contracted rate might be $95. You're billing, $200, right? The EOB says, okay, your allowable's 90, we paid you 90. To a common eye, that looks like you got paid, but only someone that's familiar with the fee schedule knows that they just shorted you $5, and $5 over thousands of claims, it's millions of dollars. So we've had to invest in the software, and really some of our use cases definitely are looking at the down coding piece too.
Very well said.
Yeah, and I would just add is like, look, when I'm converting a lot of practices from one system to another, it's their legacy tax ID where they're getting certain rates to the new tax ID when they're getting our rates. And so what am I getting asked constantly? Am I getting paid those good rates? And so that's really important. So we load the fee schedules. Athena has a way of, you could load them directly in there. Fortunately for us, we don't have as many fee schedules as you do. We're in 2 states. There's, call it, 10 major payers in Jersey, probably 20 in New York. All of them have multiple fee schedules and Medicare products and Medicaid products. So you're dealing with a lot of fee schedules, but it is manageable once you get into Athena. But the harder part then for us is actually recognizing when you're getting that underpayment. And so Adonis, with the help of Adonis, they built a tool that really allowed us to immediately see like what we're getting underpaid. And it even, the algorithms are pretty cool because it's not just, okay, if it's one code and it always gets paid the same amount, for that payer, it's really easy to see. Even Athena has a tool to do that. But if that's if an NP saw that patient and it's supposed to be 85%, Athena doesn't recognize that. We have GI procedures that are multiple CPT codes. That second and the third CPT code get paid at 50% or 25%. And so Athena would say, if you look at Athena's underpayment report, we're getting underpaid, but we're not. And I think, Adonis helped us build a tool there that allows us to have perfect visibility into all of those algorithms. So like the minute we had that implemented, I was celebrating because I could one say, we are getting paid our rates. Here's the times we're not. And here's how much money we're going to go resubmit. And so that is, to me, a very, important use case because, again, and now what's the other thing that Aetna's doing? Aetna's just downcoding and downcoding your E&Ms from 4s to 3s.
Or let's talk about how many times that the payer didn't enroll your provider accurately.
Oh, yeah. I've had to deal with that ad nauseum when we're converting flights. Like they're enrolled, they're just telling us we're out of network. I mean, if I had a finance is easy.
There's like
RCM,
3 use cases
not
in
so
that
much.
one scenario.
Yeah, I know.
I also, I hate to use the AI buzzword as an important piece of this conversation, but it is important, right? So we had some of the technology internalized through Power BI and manual spreadsheets and running our own equations on underpayments and payments not part of contract and going to the payers, which we have great relationships with. But when you show them a spreadsheet from your organization and you're like, hey, this is all the money you owe us, they're like, well, where's the if you're like, oh, no. Here's where it's coming from. This third party completely aggregated all. There's a little bit more validity to then having that conversation with the payer. So even if that is the only purpose of how much that can drive the conversation, I think it's harder for them to step up and say, this isn't you and some guy in the closet telling me how much more money I owe you because he works for you versus a third party.
So we hold this event, quarterly. At the end of last year, one of the big conversation topics was AI agents. And you guys have all given us concrete examples of using them now and how important they are. So at the end of this year, what's the conversation going to be in your mind?
I mean, I still think AI agents, we've just scratched the surface. I think of when are we going to get to this holy grail, right? And what I mean by that is like an AI agent that could, or an AI system that could do like soup to nuts, right? Where a doctor could dictate, a visit, to an AI agent that then takes notes, puts it all in the chart, codes it for you, submits the charge for you, and does all that without any human intervention. And then even remembers that claim and follows up in the right manner, whether it's getting, pinging the payer for a claim status after 30 days instead of waiting till 90 after you don't get paid, and doing all it's more like, I guess that's like orchestrating a whole kind of system across. But to me, I see how, really how impactful, even the stuff that ChatGPT could do. And then you just think about where could this go? And so that's what I'm excited about. I don't know when that's going to happen. It feels like mostly AI is used for these single sort of points, right? As opposed to sort of more comprehensive, but that's where I see, because I see all these little pieces around the puzzle being, AI being used there. So.
Yeah, I think we're still going to be talking about AI agents as well from now and for years to come. I mean, there's so many things that every time you start talking about a use case, I mean, there's another use case that's popping up. And so I think we're going to be here for a long time. And to the point that you just made, I think it's predictive analysis or predictive denial analysis, right? It's letting patients know ahead of time that their services are not going to be covered, so there are no surprises. I mean, there's so many ways to use it that it's not going anywhere.
I'm going to be the negative guy in the room, but let's flip the entire script on what can we do better with AI, how to improve our collection ratios. The payers are thinking about this the same way we are. So how much of this is they were in the room for 10 minutes. I prove that you can't bill a 99 blah, blah, blah. Like it's going to be as aggressive on the other end. And I think that's where we should be thinking on how to fear what is going to be the impact. And it's positive to make sure that every dollar is accounted for, but it's also very important to figure out what they're going to do next too and how we're going to counter that. And that's, I don't know. I think the payers are going to come at this just as strong as we are.
I agree. You already see it with some of the telehealth changes.
Yeah.
You turn this on, the different components that Adonis, and by the way, I keep thinking this is Adidas. I don't know. Like I feel like I'm in a sneaker place. But anyway, when you turn this on, what's the learning time, for the different modules that you guys worked with Adonis on, and how long did it take from first phone call to actually learning to actually deploying some AI into Athena?
So if I can answer that one. So when we first met Adonis, we weren't that willing to move our large segment to the business to them because we felt we were a very good revenue cycle company doing a lot of things well. And within 3 months, it was almost like a college kid went to like pro athlete level. And now, yeah, exactly. There you go. And now it's like Hall of Fame style athlete. So if I could say to you earlier, like, hey, like, what you offered us, we have people in-house doing pretty well. Now it's to the point where like, I can't get my best person to compete with what they're doing, if that makes sense. So I feel like, and that's 6 months less. So it's growing so fast, so quick. And the knowledge that it's learning is improving our process every day that I feel it's unsustainable to even simply request any of our people to compete. But we're not also that business that wants to start just letting go for pure dollars. So we're reassigning and retraining people in better departments for better things. And yes, where I think we're going to lose a large segment of our employed people are overseas doing menial tasks. A lot of our pre-op, pre-serve, basic, initial call outs, all that stuff's going to go away first. The complex appeals, med appeals, all that's going to stay internally. Over time, as fast as things have been developed, maybe that also becomes a subject. But for now, I feel like our quality of talent is going to improve. Our costs are going to decrease, and we're ultimately going to be in a better place in 6 to 12 months. The future is the future. I don't know where it's going to go, but it's only taken them 6 months to get to a spot where I was like, holy shit, it doesn't even look like the same thing. It really doesn't. Honestly, it was night and day different to the point where I attend as many meetings as I can. First meeting I wasn't going to attend, and the second one I was like, you need to attend this meeting. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
Pretty quick.
Yeah, no, and I would just add, I think one sort of criteria I would definitely use to evaluate a potential partner as it relates to AI is their engagement and versatility, because it is an iterative process, right? And so you sort of need somebody to kind of hold your hand and kind of go through it with you. And so I think, not to toot your guys' horn, but Adonis has been a great partner in that, figuring out our fee schedules, figuring out all the multifamily codes and all that stuff. They did that alongside us. So it just, I think that's really important, that sort of versatility, because, these things are iterative and they can be challenging. And if you hit a roadblock, you want somebody who's going to kind of take the hill with you. And I think these guys do that. And you did it pretty quickly for us, I would say.
Okay, please join me in one more round of applause for our panelists.